Recording in progress. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Renee Garrett, and I'm your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for Brainstorms, Functional Neuro Rehab for SLPs. Before we get started, we have a few items to alert you to. Each episode is 60 minutes and will be offered for zero point 0.1 ASHA CEU. If you're joining us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. Here are the financial and non-financial disclosures. Pamela Rowe receives an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for her guest appearance on a podcast, and her non-financial disclosure is that she is a member of the National Black Association of Speech, Language, and Hearing in Basel, and a committee and partnership committee member of Basel Gap Committee and Partnerships. She is also a member of the Society of Public Health Education, Sophie National and Florida chapters, and the American Public Health Association, or APHA. My financial disclosure is that I'm the owner and founder of BrainBridge Connect LLC and is the host of Brainstorms Functional Neuro Rehab for SLPs and other webinars on speech therapy PD. I do receive financial compensation. I'm also an adjunct instructor at James Madison University and Old Dominion University. My non-financial disclosure is that I'm the secretary for the Communication Disorders Foundation of Virginia. Questions can be written in the chat or the Q&A box and will be answered throughout the presentation. Now we welcome Pamela Rowe MA, CCC-SLP, who's the clinical director of a Florida-based therapy practice providing speech, occupational, physical, and respiratory therapy across 6 locations. With over 27 years of experience, she specializes in early intervention, pediatric, and adult rehabilitation services. A public health researcher and doctoral student at the University of Indianapolis, Pamela has led developmental screenings for over 2,500 multilingual children, providing key data to school districts statewide. She's a national and international speaker on topics such as central auditory processing disorder, foster care clinical services, maternal child health, telehealth, and developmental screening. Pamela has been featured on podcasts and served as a legal expert witness in high-profile cases. As co-author of 2 professional guides, she supports clinicians in launching their careers and practices. A longtime advocate for children and families with developmental delays, Pamela partners with state agencies to promote communication access and equity in underserved communities. Pam, I'm so glad to have you back. You were on with us about a year ago, and so I'm so grateful that you um, decided to come back and present again. And I'm very excited to talk about this really, for me, just a really interesting topic. And so I'm excited to learn from you and discuss. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about how we can just serve our communities in a more knowledgeable way. That's what it is. So we're so used to thinking about our community, especially as speech language pathologists. If we're in the pediatric realm, we're thinking mothers and we're thinking children, but many times we're not thinking about the father. And we're not thinking about the spectrum of fathers that are there and how do we include our fathers. And not everyone is always present. Some people
Yeah.
are present in spirit, but there's some of our families that have a member that is justice involved, that's incarcerated. So that's something that we need to educate ourselves on as we serve our families, we serve our communities. We need to start to think about these parts. And as speech language pathologists, because we serve the community, we are part of the solution. We are part of anti-recidivism. So I'm going to be throwing out some terms maybe that people have not heard of before, but recidivism is talking about the rates in which people that were justice involved, that were incarcerated, that they return back to being incarcerated, whether it's at the justice the juvenile justice system, or whether it's in the adult facilities in prison, but looking at those rates. That's called recidivism. And anti-recidivism is all the areas that we can be part of to ensure that there's wraparound services, preemptively, but also wraparound services to ensure that individuals will re-enter back into their families and their communities and thrive. And I believe that we can have a major seat at that table. There's so many tables that we need to take a little bit more of a seat at. Don't get me started on that, but we'll stay focused. We're going to stay focused.
Yeah, well, and I think that I had someone else on that's out of Colorado who um, she is working primarily with this population with underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed TBI and other cognitive communication disorders in the justice system. Um,
Oh, what's her
like
name?
later teens and mostly, adults, but later teens up into the adult range. And one of the things that we talked about a lot was that, um, a lot of people are, we make assumptions about people in the justice system that, oh, they like it because they get a roof over their heads. They have meals, right? They no, come on. Most people don't want to be in that system. It's a systemic problem. It's a place where we're not teaching strategies for people with cognitive communication disorders, pre-existing things like ADHD, pre-existing other mental health disorders where we're not involved and maybe you are if you're a school-based SLP, you're involved early on where
Right.
you might be seeing this and you might be seeing some literacy issues from kids who are bounced around because their parents are incarcerated from home to home, city to city, school to school. And then that trickles into their teenage years and their 20s, and they're not equipped to make the best decisions. And they're not necessarily in an environment where they are easy, like good decisions aren't easy. They're making
Right.
decisions for life survival, right? They need
Right.
money, they need the place to stay, they need food. Those basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs that they don't maybe even recognize that that's what it's called, but really that's what it boils down to is survival. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing what they can because they don't know. They don't have a role model. They don't have active people in their life who are providing safety. Square one is safety.
Mm-hmm.
You need to feel safe in order to make good decisions and have good brain development. And if you don't have that, it's, really setting people up for not being successful and not
Mm-hmm.
making choices because they don't know how to do that. They're just
Right.
trying to make it to tomorrow.
I want to, you mentioned something how incarceration can exacerbate and create
Mm-hmm.
and further mental health issues in our men, women, adolescents that are incarcerated. Um, you know, so there's depression, there's
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, there's PTSD. There is also self-actualization, lower self-esteem, all of those things, because you have real situations of overcrowding, limited social interaction, inadequate health care access. Can we talk about that? The health care is not popping in the prison system, and moreover than that, we have to think about it. I really want us to kind of really think about it, what it does to communities to have some of our men and women just plucked out. Many times they are the financial backbone of these families, right? Sometimes they are the sole or one of the major financial breadwinners in the family. And it doesn't just affect just that family, it can affect multi generations,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just the husband or the father, it's also he's also an uncle, he's also a
Mm-hmm.
son, he's also an employee. So it affects the entire community. And when we have that regarding when we have that upheaval in the family structure, when we have that upheaval in communities, it has a ripple effect. And it actually increases the rates of the likelihood of the child entering into the system. It almost introduces a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something, some people might say, oh, they just embraced it, they're seeing it, so they're emulating it. No, it's really not that. It's a trajectory that it sends that family on, which is really we don't look at that enough, and we don't perceive that enough. But there's so many things that we can do, but I'm going to let you get into the questions.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just thinking like it's how do we get into these systems because, as many of us would say, even in our traditional acute care models and outpatient models and inpatient rehab and school systems, speech is so low totem pole, really, seriously. Like we're so undervalued for the most part. And I think there's so many people who are doing such great work and making noise and making waves and being activists and it's a real systemic issue from insurance to
Mhm.
access to when I first started in acute care in a hospital that had six campuses in one or six buildings in one campus, and we had 1.5 SLPs, but there were 10 PTs and six OTs. That doesn't make
Uh-huh.
any sense to me. We're in
Yeah.
a burn trauma. We had a trauma, a neurotrauma. We had a trauma, just trauma, heart hospital, like all the things. And we're we're not always supported in our leadership from the top down, and that's a problem. But like getting into these systems where, you know, do you want to be going into a prison or do you want to be preemptively trying to educate kids and students from a younger age or young 20s or late teens for what they've been through and being in maybe more of a juvenile detention where it's not a full-on prison? How do we get into those spaces and how do we advocate for services? Do we go through PCPs because they don't have PCPs? So how do we get into those spaces where we know our services are so limited?
I think it's going to be, and it's always, a situation because I used to think, how do we get in there? How do we get in there? And I've hit a brick wall. I work with Jamie Gant. She's a speech language pathologist, and she had, Jamie?
I've heard the name.
Okay, so she has. I'm just bringing her in here, but I'm not going to be gossiping. Hopefully, she'll be listening to this. So, yes, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
it's
Giving that
Jessica Cortez. Yeah, for sure.
Cortez. Okay. Um, I'm going to have to nominate her for something, but I'll remember to do that later in Colorado. So Jamie Gant has a background in working in the justice system. And she's in Tampa, and we've been trying to get a foot in the door. How can we serve the juvenile justice system? And it's been a brick wall. But let me tell you this, what I learned is there are opportunities that we all have. There really are. Like, how do we get in the system? We're in the system already. We may
Yeah.
not be in the middle of the system, but wherever you are justice involved. Ooh, you need to know that. Wherever you are on this continuum, you are justice involved. It's not just the people in prison. You're in community,
Hmm.
we are in community. You are justice involved. You're involved with people who have been incarcerated.
Hmm.
Clutch my pearls. Yes, you are. You're serving
Not clutch my pearls.
you're serving families right now
Yeah.
who have needs right now. Right now, I promise you, you do. And maybe they're not opening up because you really haven't created that safe space where they can open up. I'm going
Hmm.
to say the ownership has to be on the SLP right in front of them. I'll give you a for instance. So I like to vibe with my parents, and completely no judgment zone. Okay. And I think that creating that will help them open up. I always say, hey, is there a parent that we can include in this? You know, I'm telling you that question alone, I will never say, is someone incarcerated that we could, no, I'm never going to say that, but is there another family member? Is there someone else? And I'm in an inclusive space. So sometimes that, the mother will say, well, I didn't know, but my wife, awesome. Get wifey on the phone, keep
Mhm.
it really inclusive. Or, I do have a boyfriend and he wants to be a part of this. He's incarcerated. So I don't know. Get him on the phone. And you know what? Our anti-recidivism is also in the language that we use and
Mhm.
the way in which we respect everyone. He gets on that phone. I'm yes, sir. No, sir.
Mhm.
Yes, sir. Do you have any questions? What questions can I answer for you, sir? I'm extending that dignity. So sometimes we may not be aware of who is currently or has a past history of being justice involved, but I promise you, if you start to open up that safe space, you're going to be very surprised to see, hey, this is a way that I can uphold the dignity and really extend these services to a family that is in need in a way that they feel heard, seen, and supported.
Yeah. Well, and I think a good place too is, I spent some time working with our community services boards locally. Well, really more regionally because I was working for a consulting firm that did a lot of work with individuals, like adults with intellectual disabilities who some lived with their guardians, but a lot of them lived in group home settings, which is not at all what most people think group homes are. They're residential homes. They might house for individuals, but they're living in a home. It's not like the traditional model of what we view as an institution. It's a house. So you drive up, it's a home. There's 4 bedrooms. Everybody has their own. They may be able to room with someone. They go to day support programs. And a lot of times what happens is you'll find that these individuals have history of incarceration because they have intellectual disabilities that were underserved or misinterpreted because they didn't have um, premise history forms or premise history documents on them that said, I'm out in the community, but I have a severe intellectual disability or a moderate intellectual disability, but I also have autism and maybe I have Down syndrome and maybe it's not visible to you because you don't know what to look for. And a lot of these individuals wind up incarcerated, even if it's for a brief period of time, because no one understands their need. And
Mhm.
so they may have been in a system where they did get therapy services in school, but then they've aged out. Now you're 29, 30 years old. Your AAC system that you had in high school got left behind at your old home because that home closed and now you're somewhere else. And people don't understand that these individuals are very high risk for incarceration because they're unable to advocate for themselves. And if they don't have an advocate, that's what happens is they wind up incarcerated because they're hungry and they go to the local corner store and they steal food because they don't have money and they're hungry.
Mhm.
That's not really, to me, like that's not, it's a crime, but it's not a crime, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
and
more like,
people don't the
yeah.
the general population doesn't understand that because you don't know about it, you don't see it until you work in the field and you see that. And so looking into your local community service boards and uh, state health departments for Medicaid waivers, I think you see a lot more ways that we can be involved. It tends to be in a consultative role, but that's a door. It's a foot in the door to get more direct services in some of these places and spaces that we don't know that we're involved in. I
Right.
think it's such a low number that SLPs are involved in these spaces that I think it's kind of an up and coming area, but it's really interesting to see because uh, we do have a huge role for training caregivers. Even the caregivers in places like group homes and day support programs don't know how to communicate with these individuals or how to use things like AAC or total communication to support minimal communication efforts that they may have,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's labeled nonverbal. But
Yeah.
yet we
Yeah.
go in and we're like, hey, Mr. So and so, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How are you? And you're like, well, that's not nonverbal at
Not
all.
nonverbal. Yes. I think there's a lot. We're so it's we should not be so shocked. Sometimes, let me tell you, sometimes the biggest people that take our degree for granted is ourselves. Because everybody's like, nobody knows what we do, and nobody knows the breadth and the width of speech language pathology. Well, honey boo, I'm going to say sometimes it's really the SLPs that do not know the breadth and width of what they
Hmm.
do. And we stay quiet and we stay silent and we think, well, what can I do? Or you listen, if we understood what we understood, we would be opening up our mouths a lot more. So
Yeah.
this is the great thing. When you are outside of the field, where you're talking with your buds and you're with speech language pathologists, when you get out in the field, you might feel like, oh, I'm a little timid. But when you start talking and people are like, yeah, whatever you say, because you're the boss, you know that, you will start to see how great it is to be outside of our realm. So I'm in an MPH program and I've started doing a public health consultation. Since we started talking, Renee, actually, we need to catch up on that. So I've been doing some community-based assessments and everything. And in the back of my head, I think I'm like, well, I'm just a junior because I'm the research assistant on this big.
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, I'm just a junior person. What do I know? What do I know? But there's always something that I can bring a whole different perspective in. And everybody's like, oh, wow. I, and it still surprises me, but I need to stop getting surprised that we bring so much to the table. And when we start to think about things that are right in our midst, right, that we are actually part of this continuum, things
Hmm.
like school to prison pipeline, we're a part of that. I'm not
Hmm.
saying I'm generating it, but me being I work in schools. I have contracts in schools. I work in home health. I'm part of that pipeline. In fact, they say it's so complex, they're calling it a nexus. But the school to prison pipeline, it's like the policies and the mindset and the practices and the protocols that push students, particularly students of color, and
Hmm.
students with disabilities, okay, out of the schools, and especially in certain areas, they're going to have the police called on them. There's
Yeah.
not going to be a detention. There's not going to be it's going to be like, oh, he's violent. That's pretty dark because this student's pretty dark. He's violent. Let's call the police. I don't think people understand. People are calling the police on children. I worked at a charter school just here in Palm Beach County, and this child was struggling. Now, I can see that there is possibly, maybe, definitely some undiagnosed disorder. They haven't gone through the steps of getting the diagnoses. But this child was struggling one day, and the principal just made the call and said, "That's it. We're going to call the police, and I think he's going to hurt himself, so he needs to be Baker acted." Like, it just went
Hmm.
0 to 60. Not even like, oh, let's take some time and you're having a rough day. Let's talk it over with the guidance counselor. Oh, he talks to himself. No, he's stimming. The dude's stimming. He's stimming. But
Yeah.
no, it doesn't make sense. He makes A's. Okay. So I was it was a horrible situation that I came on the tail end of, and I had to do an evaluation, and they really wanted to prove this, that, and the other thing. I was part of the prison to pipeline system.
Hmm.
But I had to document after talking with the parents, and I talked with the parents on the side and told them exactly what, my perceptions were and everything. They were already on board, so they, ended up taking the child out of the school, but there's many of these instances, children with and adolescents with disabilities, and also
Mm-hmm.
children of color, and also they don't really put it in here, but also children of different languages. Okay,
Yeah.
can we
And
talk
or
about the
childhood trauma.
and childhood trauma, the ACEs, the adverse childhood events? There's a lot, and with jumping to conclusions, and it's more than just jumping to conclusions, right? Because when we're talking
Yeah.
about jumping to conclusions, that's when you're like, oh, you're going from 0 to 60, but we're talking about calling the police on a child.
Yeah.
You put that on a record,
Yeah.
they're labeled. They are
Mm-hmm.
the ones that you call the police on.
Yep.
And it follows them everywhere from county to
Mm-hmm.
county to county to county. And you hope that people are going to be educated that come into contact with that child, but it's already labeled on there. It's labeled. So it increases the likelihood that that child will have the police called again.
Mm-hmm.
And it snowballs, it snowballs, it snowballs. That's one child, but it's a common practice.
Yeah, I had someone who was in his early 60s. Um, this caseload I had before, and he was labeled as, I think it was a severe cognitive disorder, schizophrenia. Everybody in this is labeled schizoaffective. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but I feel like it's a blanket diagnosis.
It's a blanket. It's like cerebral
Everyone
palsy.
has schizoaffective disorder, and everyone's got a profound or severe. But when I went to see him, and I said, what do you feel like is hard for you to communicate? He goes, oh, nothing. He said, just people don't listen. And, of course I'm paraphrasing, but like his needs were, when I want to go to get Popeye's chicken, I want to go to get Popeye's chicken. And when I'm here and I say, they ask me what I want for lunch, it's in a day support setting, and he comes from a group home, and they want him to say what he wants based on their menu selection. But he's more not so concrete. He's like, well, I want Popeye's chicken, and I have money. And he'll say things like, I have money in my account, so get me some Popeye's chicken. And they're like, oh, he has an attitude. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He just wants what he wants. And he's got the intellect enough to know he has money on his account, and he's not in the justice system, but he's prior justice involved. So those are the words that he uses is, I know I have money on my account, and I
Mhm.
want some Popeye's chicken. So for him, it's like, it's not a me problem, it's a you problem.
Right.
Because I told you what I wanted when you asked me the appropriate question. I gave you an appropriate answer, and you chose to act in a way that's not appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
which makes total sense to me. And they're
Makes sense.
asking me to fix that communication. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with
No.
that level of communication. You ask him a concrete question, he gave you a concrete answer. You wanted to give him forced choice when that's not what he needed, and he's intelligent enough to know that he can communicate in this way that was the expectation of based on the question you ask. And I got so frustrated with that case because they would say, oh, he talks under his breath, but he would say stuff like, if she don't give me my Popeye's chicken, I'm gonna be real mad. Oh, okay, well, I would be the same way. I'd be like,
I would.
if I wanted something specific to eat and I'm in the care of someone else and you ask me the concrete question, I'd be mad too, especially
Exactly.
if I know I have that money.
But how many times adults, even those adults, will say,
Yeah.
oh, I really want some jerk chicken, or I really want some curried beef, or I really want some sushi, or and you can do it. You have the agency, and you have the
Yes.
ability and the privilege of just getting what you want. Um, yeah, I think people have difficulty bringing it back to themselves, and kind of checking the
Mhm.
bias first.
Yeah, and even when I worked the last acute care hospital that was the one I spent the longest tenure at, we had a prison that was half a mile down the road, and it's a regional detention center, and we often got inmates from, various whatever. We're not allowed to ask why they were incarcerated, but some came in with a guard and were, the shackles to the bed or whatever, and some were not. But a lot of times when you go in, there were a lot of people who were afraid because they make assumptions. And sometimes it was like people that were incarcerated for whatever reason, but they had things like MS, or they had uh, like sickle cell, or some other, progressive or long-standing disorder that required ongoing medical care that the prison system couldn't provide them. And they would have an exacerbation of lupus or
Mhm.
whatever it was, and they would come into the hospital for a short period of time. And a lot of times people would get really like, especially, and I don't like saying this necessarily because I feel like I'm picking on less seasoned or younger clinicians or younger nurses who are early 20s or whatever. But a lot of times that's what would happen is they'd have this preconceived notion, or they'd have this fear because they'd never had this experience before. And so what I would always say is just talk to them like they're a human, because guess what? They are.
They
Just
are.
go in.
This
Don't
is so
go in with this
fun.
fear.
Yeah,
Go in and say, "Hey, my name is Renee. I'm a speech language pathologist, and the doctor asked me if I could evaluate your swallowing. Are you having issues? What's going on? How are you eating? How are you eating before this, or whatever the case may be?" And people are always like, "Oh, you just talk to them like they're regular people," and I'm like,
that's unfortunate. So
"It is," but it's that stigma
the stigma,
surrounding this whole justice involved, that it's an assumption that it's their fault. They chose to make a bad choice, or they got put in a bad situation. And they put themselves in a bad situation. And we know
yeah,
that, yeah, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not true.
yeah,
And for all the reasons that you mentioned, and I think that's part of the our own bias and our own systemic problems that we have in government, healthcare, all the things, and literacy, um, generational trauma, that people just they don't want to talk about it because it's painful to them.
yeah.
Maybe they have it too, and they just don't want to talk about it because now we've risen above it because we have a master's degree or we have a doctoral degree, and we're out of the system, and we don't want to go back. But
Hmm.
we have to remember that this could touch anyone.
And it does. Like I'm gonna keep on saying it. We're all justice involved. We're all
Yeah, if you
todos,
who's
todos.
ever who's ever been pulled over for
Yeah, yeah.
a not I didn't really violate the traffic, whatever. I just got pulled over. I
Hmm.
actually got pulled over because, and this was years ago when my kids were little, I got pulled over going to pick my kids up from school
Mm,
because my car fit the description of a bank robbery in the area. And I was probably like, I don't know, 32. And I'm like, do I look like I'm going to rob a bank? And of course, that's probably the worst thing you could say because the
yeah,
police officer was like, you'd be surprised. And I'm like, oh God, here we go.
yeah, yeah. I tell you what, it's tough when you're talking about that the patient that
Mhm.
that's now in the facility, and he comes in. The system does a lot to fan the flames, if you know what I mean. He's coming in with planking, shackles, and the pictures, and this, and handcuffed and everything. It's pretty dramatic,
Yeah.
right? Dramatic for visually for someone else, but then think about mentally walking in and thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get good care here. Look how I'm walking in. And what that does to someone's spirit, what that does to them mentally, what that does to their psyche and their mental health. It's a lot. It's very alarming. And just being able to I think everyone understanding that the care of patient, deserves everyone deserves good public health. Everyone deserves good public health care, and everyone deserves the services that we give, not just who we think should have it, but everyone deserves that. It's not a privilege. Everyone absolutely deserves it. And we got to do a little bit better. Well, a whole lot better. We have to do a whole lot better of understanding that, it's these are our families. This is someone's brother. This is someone's son. This is someone's, or talking about women. This is someone's mother. This is someone's daughter or auntie, or thinking about all of these relationships. And it may not be someone directly related to us, but we're related. We're in the same community. If
Mm-hmm.
they're in your facility, you're a community partner, you're a community member, you're in relationship with them, not just as provider, but as a community. And this is part of, we've got to learn how to care for all the members of our community, whether we
Yeah.
feel comfortable doing it or not. We just got to get over that. Just whole I've got to be comfortable in order. Come on, get over it. That's so it's so outdated, and it's so basic. It really, at this point, it really is basic. I mean, we've got to rise above, and we really have to care like we mean it. We really do. We really
Oh,
have to
that's
provide
so good.
quality speech language pathology like we mean it, like it's tailor fit, and it'll be a nice wraparound services to meet the needs, not our needs. So we feel ooshy gushy inside, but I'm talking the community's needs, their family needs, our justice involved individuals, their needs.
I read something today, and I have a question that's in the Q&A I'm going to ask in a minute, but I read something today. Dr. Ines Humbert put something up, and I think it was like on the Facebook Med SLP forum, and she tends to post on like multiple groups.
Right.
The point of it, and I'm not going to try to quote everything she said, but the story was about how sometimes SLPs will say, "Oh, well, I'm limited by insurance, or I'm limited by the care plan, or I'm limited by XYZ, whatever that factor is." But what if this patient was paying you in cash or like a private pay patient? How would that change your service delivery? Meaning, you know that you have someone telling you you have to meet these productivity expectations and you have a certain limited amount of time. But if you didn't, would you do better? Would you provide better care? Would you be researching better? Would you be making sure access to ongoing care was better? And I thought that was a really great summary for kind of how our field is moving, because a lot of us are moving in that direction where we're saying, you know what, I'm not going to work for someone anymore who's telling me I've got to be 90 to 100% productive, but you're paying me $50 an hour. And maybe I do have just the entry level master's, but I'm 15 years in. My entry level master's has resulted in um, fees training and modified barium specialized training, certified brain injury specialty, a host of other things, Parkinson's, speak out, amp care, like all these other things that I've paid for out of pocket, speaking at state conferences, advocating at state level, national level as a volunteer. Like, if you're going to sit there and say, oh, no one's helping me do my job, but you're not getting off your laurels and
Mhm.
getting into the place where maybe it's a little uncomfortable, and you're
Yes.
seeing how that uncomfortable trickles down to the patient. If they were paying you to do that, would you do it differently? And I thought that was great. I really did. I thought that was so profound, um, and maybe profound's not the right word, so accurate
Hmm.
and resonate with a lot, like resonates with a lot of people, because a lot of us are trying to do that very thing. And I never thought of it though as in terms of if you were paying me privately, if I would do it differently. I don't think I would, because I just have a big mouth.
I have a very big mouth. We
I
have
don't
big
really
mouth, Renee. We have very big mouth, and we don't
care.
care.
Yeah, no, I don't
We
care.
have
I just,
really big mouth. I mean, we care. That's why we
yeah.
have mouths, I think. But
Yeah, I
we
don't
have,
care about what you tell me I need to do. I tell you that this patient needs XYZ. We need
yes.
to provide a diagnosis and an education, support the caregiver, advocate for better services and more services, because TBI patients to get 4 visits and outpatients, complete crap. It's
Hmm.
complete crap.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Because what happens next?
I know exactly what happened. So we can advocate, and I tell you what, so many times I do home health. My company has contracts with home health companies, and we're the ones. I'm telling you, we got on the scene. Telling you, we got on the scene, and some insurance companies started having meetings about us. And you're doing good stuff and getting into good trouble when you have a major insurance company having a meeting about why has our utilization gone up 300 or 3,000% because of Pamela Rowe speech therapy, and why? You know why? Because we're giving services. Those three visits you give us, we're going
Yeah.
to advocate for the patient, and we're going to continue. You want to give us three at a time? Fine. We're going to ask for three at a time. And we're going to keep on asking and keep on, because I'm petty. Ooh, when it comes to, I'm petty. And I'm telling you, we work until we can get them transitioned properly to outpatient. We're we're getting into a lot of trouble. And yeah, we don't care. It's I'm 50. Let me tell you, Renee, I turned 50. So it's like I'm really, you know, I hope that everybody can get to this point where you're just like, you know what, I'm going to open my mouth, and it costs. You said it right. It costs. It's going to cost your comfort. I've been uncomfortable for a
Yeah.
long time. I
Yeah.
decided I was going to go back and get my doctorate. Why did I decide that when I was 40, 48? Why? But you know what? There's so much work to be done, and we're
Yeah.
so needed. And I'm telling it is fun. It is fun to think of all the ways in which we can get involved in policy change.
Yeah.
The SLP voice. Now let's talk about that. The SLP voice. How can I get involved? How policy change,
Yeah.
showing up.
State organizations are great. I'm sorry, a lot of people don't agree with that, but I did it for 9 years, and now the Communication Disorders Foundation, we typically, it's not so much advocacy, it's fundraising for student scholarships.
Mhm.
But we do partner with our state organization still. And a lot of, it's funny to me, and I've probably said this on the podcast before, but someone, there was a colleague of mine in grad school said, "Oh, well, when you were on the state board and you were president, you got a salary." And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" No, girl. No, I did not. No, but what I got was I got to go, and you love ASHA or you don't. That's not what this is about. I
Not
got to go to ASHA, and what happened was I learned strategic planning. I learned how to create a mission and vision statement, and we learned how to create long-term and short-term goals for our association. That would have never happened at my employer. I did it twice. I'm very grateful for that because it's helped me in my business, because otherwise I wouldn't understand. I don't have an MBA. I wouldn't understand how to create those things. I wouldn't understand, um, how that strategic plan is a living, breathing document that you can update and change at any time based on the needs of your organization or the needs of your clients or your patients. And so for that, I'm very grateful because, I got to work with a very great lobbyist within our Commonwealth, which also taught me a lot because that,
yes.
that sounds so scary to go to Capitol Hill in your state and work with the lobbyists, but it's really not. It's like they're
Cool.
human. They all put their pants on the same way we do. And they're usually like super supportive. They're very accessible via phone or email or whatever, and they want to help. They don't know, a lot of our legislators don't, again, they don't know what we do because no one's told them. Everyone assumes they just know all the things. They don't know anything about what, unless you tell them and you advocate. So that's a great place to start. And if you're not into like super volunteerism like that, you can just go to Capitol Hill and be there in the background on Advocacy Day and see what that looks like. Or go to your state conference and point people to like where the student posters are or the general session. Do that. Micro volunteerism is a great way to learn more. Even if you feel like, okay, I don't want to be the president. I don't want to. even volunteer for a committee, but I can go there and I can say, oh, this is okay. Yeah, they need someone to say, oh, the box lunches are over
Right.
there.
I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. Anyone can do that. Um, but so the question that because you and I love to talk about advocacy and all the things.
Mhm.
The question that someone put in the chat was, is Pamela involved in JV Hall to do screenings and provided therapy? And so just to clarify, JV Hall, is that like juvenile? Like I just want to make sure that we have the correct information to answer the question, Sarah. So if you could just clarify in the Q&A, that would help us answer.
So I don't do screenings in the justice system. I have worked with legal teams.
Juvenile. Okay. Yeah,
Um,
she's juvenile hall. Okay.
Juvenile, no. Yeah, I had said that at the beginning. I really would love to have an in there. I'm in Florida, so it's very difficult. And when I tell
Yeah.
you, I feel so, you know what I'm saying? I've been in practice since 2002, so I feel like, oh, I can schmooze my way. Nope, brick, brick. Now, that being said, I am thinking of some different backdoors because I'm getting ready to start my dissertation and I'm going to have to do a lot of listening sessions. Ooh, and I'm going to have to do a lot of focus groups, and it's all anti-recidivism. And I tell you what, you were saying you can be involved. There's so many ways you can be involved at the state. I love our state association. They are constantly working and doing a lot of different legislation. It is amazing. But even if you are like a researcher, I'm telling you right now, I'm writing a CDC funded literature review outside of my wheelhouse, but the purpose of it is to drive policy change.
Hmm.
100% is to drive policy change. Am I a politician? No. But I do have a big mouth. So when people read it, at the end, they're going to be like, this girl has a big mouth. If you're a researcher, how can I get involved? You might be thinking, how can I get bolder?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, get bolder and think, well, who am I to make recommendations? Write your research, especially at the end, because they're only going to look at the beginning and they're only going to look at the end. Write it so that a lobbyist, a politician can pick it up and run with it and help. So they'll have something to reference and they can understand it and they have a blueprint to run and get some policy change. Because if we write like that and we write like we want to have policy change because of the time and the effort that we're putting into our literature reviews, our research, I'm telling you, we have a great opportunity to do that. And think intersectional.
Yeah.
Intersectional.
Yeah, because a lot of people think I have a master's degree and I don't have a space or there's no forum for me in research, and that's just simply not true. And I've had people say that to me when I've been at an invited talk, and they're like, "Oh, well, you just have a master's degree," and I'm like,
I
I spend most of my day when I'm not with patients reading research, and there's a lot of people who are, uh, and I'll shout out Ed Bice. He's in my state and a huge dysphagia researcher, and he'll say, learn how to discern the research because a lot of times the research you're reading is not a well-designed study, and it wasn't it's giving you a conclusion it's a conclusion, but it's not based on a well-designed study. And so I think a lot of people miss that piece of what is a well-designed study and how do we uh, discern research that way? Because I think that's where they get scared and they think, oh, well, I'm just going to read all the things and everything is gospel, and we know that's not
nope,
true.
no,
So I think some really good starting points are uh, always going to be like meta-analysis and systematic reviews because those are people who have spent so much time. Like I was looking at this one earlier, and it's not it's I think it's out of Spain. It might be Spain, it might not be. It's well, I gotta go back to the top. It's on it's PubMed. I was reading this before I talked to you.
Mhm.
It's communication disorders in the correctional system, a systematic review, but it was published in Revista Española de Sanidad Penitent. Yeah, I'm not going to try to say that word because I don't want people to tell me that I suck at Spanish. I
You
know.
said it wrong.
But it's talking about communication, hearing loss, coordination for things like voice, language fluency, any disruption in the biological system for communication, and how we need to be looking at that amongst prison inmates. And so what they did was they looked at, and this was a smaller review because this is a smaller publication, but they looked at 25 articles that were selected in the final review, and they had a pretty big sample size of over 2,000 individuals, with both. No, it was, yeah, it had both female and male, but two of the studies were conducted with just female populations, which I thought was super interesting. But like you said, we only read the beginning and the end.
Right.
But it talks about, again, the support for knowing that prison inmates have a higher frequency of language and communication disorders, and it's not necessarily one factor or the other. It can be anything from childhood trauma to um, poor access to educational systems in their youth. You know, I go back to when I was a student and I worked in a pediatric outpatient facility, and I had an 8-year-old kid, and this has stuck with me. I was in this placement over 15 years ago, and I had this student who the parents were both, um, they both had backgrounds that were not conducive to them having a good supported education.
Mhm.
Dad was in and out of the prison system. He was a roofer. No, I'm sorry, he was a bricklayer by trade. They had 5 kids. He was, I think, the second oldest, and he was 8 years old. He'd been in 5 elementary schools at the age of 8, and he was in second grade, couldn't read, and had no phonemic awareness whatsoever. So guess what? Yeah, we haven't set him up for success, but also at that point they were houseless. They had been living in a hotel that they couldn't afford because dad had gone back into the system. And it was like this story even now sits so heavy with me because I don't know what happened to this kid. And pediatrics is not my jam. It's not what I do. It's not where I landed. It's not where I stayed. And so, but it still hurts my soul to know that it's been, over 15 years, and where's this kid?
Mhm.
Because now he's a grown man. He's about the same age as my son. And where is he? What's he doing? Did someone take advocacy for him, or act in advocacy for him? Um, and that's one example of thousands and thousands and
Now,
probably millions of kids who get into this system not by fault of any choice that they made, but it's the system that they got placed into, and they don't have an advocate.
mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's really, we gotta get in there. We gotta
We
be
got to
in.
get in there, and I think we're already in spaces right now. Um, the my favorite thing to always say, and I serve on a lot of committees. For free, for free. Yes, I volunteer even outside of my backyard. I'm volunteering right now with the Youth Homeless Coalition. They have a youth advisory board in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm on that call every week. And with my big mouth, and I'm the one that's going to say, what about our children, our youth? Can we think about this from an intersectional lens? Can we think about neurodiversity? Can we think about justice involved? When we're thinking about the support, they're like, okay, Pam, now we're and we do a lot of work meetings and everything. Our mouth is so powerful. We can bring advocacy everywhere we go, in every meeting. when you're in your IEP meetings and when you're in your planning meetings and you know this, speak up. And you can say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? Renee and Pam, they were talking about school to prison pipeline. Are we part of this pipeline or are we part of the solution? Yes. Yes, you can use your mouth and you say it in a whatever. I always say it in a chat GPT way. You don't have to say it in. I literally, Renee, I'm running all of my emails through chat GPT. And it's always like, Pam, take it down a notch. But I am. But the sentiment is still there. I ran it through chat GPT. The sentiment is there. The same way we can take that same idea and bring these advocacy concerns and these realities so that it's just being considered, because I promise you there are families that are going through these difficulties of being justice involved and pre or post or during, and we need to make sure that we keep space for them and we take things into consideration, how to serve them better and how to serve their specific needs, because it's a lot different than Jimmy and Jane, who have mom and dad at home and have none of those, food insecurity or housing insecurity or and financial or employee insecurities or health insecurities. It's different. It's different. It's different. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll mention when I speak on social determinants of health, whether it's literacy or we get into like food insecurity. And a lot of times people think food insecurity isn't a thing and it doesn't affect these kids. But if you're hungry, how does it affect you? If you know that you're an active adult who needs to go to the gym and you were working in healthcare and you didn't get to eat your lunch that day, are you going to be able to go run 5 miles or 10? Is it your long run day? Is it your long workout day? Are you going to feel like doing that? Probably not. So if little Tommy is sitting at home, and he is sleeping at the neighbor's house because mom has to work an overnight shift and dad's in prison and they don't have food, how do you think he's going to perform in school the next day? He's not.
He's
He's going to
not.
be sleepy. He doesn't have any energy. He doesn't have good, long-standing, like consistent nutrition. Maybe don't have access to um, health insurance where he's getting good preventative care, or consistent checks with the pediatrician to make sure his growth margins are being met and his developmental. And again, I don't work with kids, but like I have kids. So I know like thinking about those things is really important. And I want to go back to this study I was talking about because one of the things that really stood out for me in their discussion was talking about how uh, this was this particular example comes from the US. Young people with language disorders are particularly, I'm quoting, particularly vulnerable to not understanding their Miranda rights and the consequences of waiving them. They don't understand that there may be an ignorance of their rights and maybe it's a hostile environment that they're already finding themselves in. So they're not listening anyway.
Right
So
now. Yep.
compound that with a language disorder and whatever that looks like, whether it's receptive, expressive, or both, they might, and we've seen this in some of these documentaries that people sensationalize, but we've seen it where people don't understand their rights, they waive their rights, and then they basically get railroaded, or vice versa. They accept their rights and they don't request an attorney, but they don't understand the language of maybe they understood the Miranda rights, right? But maybe they don't understand the language from a seasoned investigator, um, and they waive their right to an attorney and they just start talking and they're like, oh, they for whatever whatever the timeline is, whatever there's a whole lot of
Yes.
uh, pieces and parts and components, and they don't. Again, a lot of these youth, and even I see it in our 30, 40 year olds. They're not equipped to answer questions. They don't
Mm-mm.
understand the question, much less are they able to come up with um, a well thought well thought out response or an accurate response. They're giving the response that they think will get them out of trouble.
Yeah. 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 And
And
it's,
it takes me, I had and I'll give this example because I had an eye appointment this morning, and uh, I was sharing with the tech that was doing my initial screening stuff. My daughter started wearing glasses when she was 8, and I said, that if you go to the eye doctor, you'll know this will like 1 or 2, 2 or 3. And I said, we get to like 8 or 9, and I'm like, oh my God, she can't see anything. And my tech said, well, probably what happened is kids want to give the right answer, but
Mhm.
they aren't always able to know what the right answer is. So sometimes it looks the same, and maybe they want to uh, give the right answer, but the right answer is the same because like 8 or 9 might look the same, but they think they're wrong. And
Mhm.
so if you translate that into these justice involved individuals across the lifespan, they want to give the right answer sometimes, and they're giving the answer they think you want, but it
Right.
may not be accurate, especially compounded by a communication disorder. So,
And then also compound that on literally, there's a study that many times Black children that are not adults are adultified, meaning someone
yes.
is talking to them as an adult and they're like, wait, what? Because I'm a kid or I'm just a teen, but they're talking to them in a very inappropriate manner as if they're an adult. So that's very disorienting as well. So these situations that are all a part of the prison to pipeline and how it can, yes, so true. So how can, you know, just having more discussions about this. This is, not a once and done things, folks. But this is a discussion that, if you want to call me up, you can call me up. I don't know. You can need to find someone. You can continue to talk these things out, talk about public health. Because that's something that I do. And I know, Renee, you do. Our big mouths. We're always talking about it, talking about it, talking about it. And I'm talking about this. You know why? Because it's going to help me get the machine going, because I'm going to have to talk to other agencies and hopefully connect with them and get some people that can participate in. I'm so excited about my research and the focus groups and everything. So I'm going to be talking. People like, well, how did you get here? You're a speech language pathologist. Oh, I cannot wait until people ask me that. So yes, this is not a once and done thing. We're going to keep on talking about it and talking about it and talking about it more and more and more. And I'm telling you, you're going to know when this research is done, because I have a big mouth, and I'm telling you, anywhere I can splash it, I'm going to say Oprah. Oprah. Y'all think I'm kidding. You think I'm kidding.
I don't think you're kidding. I know
Tyler
you.
Perry, whatever, whoever. Geraldo Rivera, is he still going? I don't
I
know.
don't think
See,
so.
I'm
Well,
dating myself. I'm
we'll
sorry.
resurrect him. We'll resurrect him. Dr. Phil,
God,
somebody.
whoever. I'm going to be talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, but we need to feel comfortable. And it starts with engaging in these conversations and getting our vocal folds used to and our minds used to having this. Yes, use your voice, SLPs. Continue talking and talking until your voice doesn't sound so weird to your own ears. It doesn't
Hmm.
sound so weird to you till you start to feel and you can fill the room and not be afraid to take space, because we need to. We have a lot to offer. We have a lot of perspective of serving the community, but we just need to continue to learn and speak about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that kind of comes back from the episode, and someone mentioned this with Jessica Cortez, who was a guest on the podcast, but also I got to work with her for a different conference. Um, she just happened to be at a conference in Arizona where she met someone who introduced her to someone who was an activist for this very thing, and that's how she got involved in it initially. And I think that's again where things like community services boards, um, if you're working with someone who has been in the justice system and they have an attorney, talk to the attorney, reach out and say, hey, you know what, I know you can't tell me anything about this case, but I offer this service. Who else do you maybe know? Who can you link me to? Because a lot of it is all about your, we talk about support networks, but we talk about our interprofessional networks, and why not? If you want to be involved in this space, that's places that you can easily reach out to and say, hey, uh, reach out to your brain injury association of your state. I'm sure that many states have links to uh, ways that you can advocate or provide services to justice involved individuals. And it doesn't have to be you walking into a prison, having you probably gonna have a criminal background check, let's be honest, but you don't have to walk in there and get screened and do things and make yourself super physically uncomfortable. You can do telehealth in that space right now.
You really,
Fingers crossed that doesn't go away. But you can start there and make inroads in not only juveniles, but in young adults and even other adults, because it can change the rest of their life by providing them with strategies, by providing them with the education of, hey, you have this cognitive disorder, or you have this communication disorder, um, and maybe no one's ever told you that, but here's how I can help you.
mhm.
And it starts just that simply. So, um, yeah. And
Sounds
I
like,
can't wait for your research, and you got to come back when you do that.
oh, I will. I will. I'm taking this. It's funny. I say I'm going to take the lazy route and I'm going to use it as my capstone and my dissertation and everything. But I'm like, dude, I'm doing 2 degrees. That's not lazy. It's smart, I think.
It's You're not lazy. No, no, absolutely not. And of course, I just want to say thank you again for reaching out and coming back on, because you're a great guest and you have such great insight. And it's I think for us, it's just so needed. Um, and so I appreciate you being so willing to share your time and your knowledge. And we wish you so much. No, I don't want to say luck, because you're going to do it. Doesn't matter if you have luck or not. I just wish
How
you
does it,
so much continued success, I guess is the best way of saying it. And you're always welcome to come back and share with us.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I will be back.
I love it. I love it. Just as a reminder, if you've joined us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course, before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. And again, Pam, thank you so much, future Dr. Pam.
Thank you. Thank you.
We love you and keep doing all the things.
Thank you. All righty.
I'll see you
Bye-bye.
soon.